Hello, everybody. We're going to speak about the subject that people don't like yet, AI, agents. I know you're not happy, but you're going to have to listen because you came to the wrong room. That's okay. Anyways, so let's talk about AI agents and everything else. And I like to focus this specifically towards internal developer platforms or operations or things that normally people in this conference do. Now I have a question for you. Let's say that I open Cloud Code or Cursor or something like that, and I say, hey, I would like you to create a database for me in AWS, right? Now, one thing you should know about AI is that it's always trying its best to please you, right? Kind of like, yes, master, I'm going to do exactly what you told me. I'm going to create a database in AWS because you're right. And this is one of the options it gives me. Now, who thinks that this is correct? Does this feel correct? No? I beg to differ. I think that you would be fired if you do this. But this is actually correct. Because this is the response which I would interpret if I would use my own words, you silly, silly person. Based on information that you gave me, which is nothing except that you want to do some database in AWS, suffer through this result, right? If you came to me as a person and said, I want a database in AWS, I would give you the same answer, just to be clear. Right? That's what you would get. So it is not necessarily technically correct. It is not necessarily technically wrong. They will eventually get MySQL, maybe. Yeah, if you go to console, you will get MySQL and so on and so forth. But there are quite a few problems with that, quite a few. This is second, if you get fired, if you do this in my company, if you do the second option, you don't get fired. I open a window and ask you politely to jump or risk being pushed. Anyway, there are quite a few problems over there, right, in what I did and my interaction with AI and so on and so forth. The first problem is that there is insufficient intent. I said, hey, database in AWS. I never said that I want RDS. I never said that maybe I would like Postgres instead of getting MySQL. I never said whether it should be publicly accessible and so on and so forth. There is a bunch of things that I haven't said. And if I don't define what I want, it is only normal for the one on the other end, be it AI or a human, just make assumption. Kind of, hey, good that you told me that you want it in AWS, otherwise you would get it in Linode. The second problem is that AI, we can assume right now that large language models have more or less all the publicly available information, right? It knows everything there is to know about AWS. It knows everything there is to know about Postgres. What it doesn't know is what are the capabilities of your system, right? Which tools can I use? Which APIs can I consume, and so on and so forth, right? So it has public knowledge. So imagine that it's a similar situation as if you just hire some person today in your company and say, go database, right? No idea whether you use AWS, whether you use Azure, whether you use on-prem, whether you use Terraform, whether you use Ansible, if you use Ansible, I'm terribly sorry, but whatever you're using, right? So no idea about the capabilities. It doesn't understand your company's best practices. It understands the infinite amount of random practices on the internet. It doesn't understand what are your best practices. What are the patterns that your company uses. It doesn't understand your policies, like, hey, region is always US East 1, right? And you will very, very quickly realize that the context that you're managing becomes garbage very, very, very fast, right? So basically, in other words, three key areas that we need to focus if we want to be successful with our agentic systems or whatever we're having, is that we need to figure out how do we manage context really well, because depending on that's one of the things that people just starting don't realize. There is a massive difference between you typing random things and you providing a proper context to the LLM. We need some kind of workflow, something that will guide kind of like the correct response to I want AWS I want database in AWS. The correct response should not be here are the solutions. The correct response should be, Viktor, you're an idiot, give me more information, right? So some kind of workflows that will guide both the person behind the steering wheel and the agent towards stuff, and finally, learning, right? Now, the problem with AI, with LLMs, is that they're like people with amnesia, right? You talk to that person for a while, and then you come back tomorrow, and that person does not remember you. It has no recollection that you ever spoke to him or her. So we need to figure out how do we provide learning, how we teach AI, what are the capabilities of our platform, what are the patterns that we use in this company, and what are the policies. But the problem is that we cannot teach it, simply say, hey, I'm going to teach you everything, because you need to teach it every single time. Every single time you interact with the LLM, it starts from scratch. That means that you cannot just teach it everything. You need to figure out how will I find all the information that I have that is relevant to that intent. Like, I need all the capabilities, policies, and patterns related to AWS and databases, right? I need to somehow find the information that matters and put it in that context. So I feel that those are the key areas that anybody should be focusing on if you want to put agentic systems in motion, right? And then start screaming, kind of, it doesn't work. It works, just not the way how you set it up, not out of the box. So let's talk about platform capabilities first, right? Now, in my world, what I assume is that a platform that I'm building is accessible through an API, right? And then there are some services behind that API that are doing something. That's the same model like AWS, like Azure, like Google Cloud, or any other third-party vendor. It's just that it's mine, right? So I have an API over there, and through that API there are 57 endpoints, one for databases, one for applications, back and front, whatever it is. Now, since we live in 2025 and we are in KubeCon, that API is of course Kubernetes, because anything else would be a waste of time, right? So extending my Kubernetes with additional API endpoints. In my case, I use Crossplane. You can use anything you want. And we need to figure out how, those are the capabilities, right? What you can do is that API. Now, Kubernetes has something horrible in it called etcd, which does not allow us to search, which does not allow, especially does not allow us to do semantic search. It cannot find information fast, right, in Kubernetes. You can list all the endpoints, and then good luck, right? So what we're doing, what I'm trying to do, is take all those APIs that represent my platform, create embeddings. For those of you not aware of embeddings, embeddings are a way how to transform some keywords, key text, important key text into numbers, multi-dimensional numbers, and stuff them into a database. Because then, from there on, we can do semantic search. Because if I search for a database and there is a word Postgres, the numbers are very close together, and it will find it. It will say, this is 98% similar. You said database, I have Postgres, very similar thing. That's what you're looking for, right? So Kubernetes API converted into embeddings, stored in a vector database. That's the key if you want agents to be able to find resources that match what is needed. And that's relatively similar, right? So simple. So Kubernetes API, you all know it, you're in KubeCon. Through that API, we can control AWS, Google Cloud, on-prem, whatever you want. Agent, try to use agent with Kubernetes. I guarantee it will fail on anything but a version cluster, right? So agents are going to get confused. You're going to convert it into embeddings. You're going to store it in a vector database, and agent is going to be able to search for it, right? That's the model, at least from my perspective, that works today. Semantic search, important. Then we have company patterns. Right now, company patterns are complicated because company patterns are everywhere, right? It's in Zoom call that you had yesterday with your boss. It's in Slack over there. It's in your head. It's in some wiki page that nobody ever read in their life. If you look at the read count of wiki pages, you will always get pleasantly surprised. But anyway, they're the tribal knowledge. They're somewhere. And we need to figure out how do we, to begin with, let's face it, new hires have the same problem like AI. Kind of, welcome to the company. Information is somewhere. And if you're very nice, you may discover it one day, if you're proactive. So it's a relatively similar story, right? Like with capabilities. They are everywhere. We need to somehow create embeddings. We need to somehow put it in a database and search for it, right? Even you as a person would benefit from the data. Even if you never use agents in your life or AI, you would benefit greatly from a vector database, right? That's not completely dissimilar from, let's say, Google, right? When you search, you don't find only exact words that you're searching. You find things that are closest to it you can imagine. And finally, policies. That's more or less the same story, like patterns. The major difference is that policies can be also converted into Kubernetes policies like Caverno, like Kubernetes admission validations, whatever, OPA, Gatekeeper, and so on and so forth. Now, the important thing about policies is that policies, both for people and AI, are the last line of defense, right? That's kind of like a cop, police person that catches you when you do something wrong, but the goal is not for you to keep doing something wrong, to continue being caught, but to learn what is the right thing. Policies in Kubernetes do not teach you what to do. They prevent you from being ignorant, right? But so we still need it in a database from where people or AI will find information, and then last line of defense, Caverno, or whatever you're working on. So insufficient intent workflows, so I'm going to show you that. And now the time has come for me to show you the demo of how all that works together. If you want to interrupt me with questions, that's even better. Most of the time, demos do not work, but we're going to try it now. Okay, let's see. I have here Claude Code, right? Now this is, I have an agent connected to Claude Haiku model, I think. I have an MCP server that implements everything I showed, right? It allows AI to search in database for capabilities, for policies. It has workflow, it has everything there. That's my weekend project. So what did I say before? Create a database in AWS. The same thing I showed you before. The same thing that gave me the answer, like go to the console and click a button, or create EC2 instance. It's going to call MCP. I expect demos to fail somewhere in the middle, so you're safe now. Maybe, who knows? Is the Wi-Fi working? Let's see. Daily show. It works. Okay, now this is AI coming back to me and saying, you remember how this is the workflow, because in MCP I have an agent inside, and it's instructed to say, if Viktor says something stupid, or anybody else, go back to that person and say, I understand that your capacity is limited, but maybe you can give me more information. Like, hey, would you like to make it relational database or NoSQL database or time series, or you're not sure? Let's say PostgreSQL, right? Why is this not? Okay, there we go. Or how big should the workload be? I'm in KubeCon, they're not worth big investments, so small. High availability, make it basic, it's fine, submit, right? It follows a certain workflow of certain policies, practices in my company, because if I open the Jira ticket and send it to one of you, you would respond to me with the same thing, right? You would tell me, Viktor, come on, be serious. Pretend to be serious. Submit the answers, and this will take a couple of minutes, so I'm going to jump to the next step that I already executed before, just for you not to wait for a few minutes. Basically what it did, the agent in that MCP, it went to the database and said, look, Viktor said PostgreSQL, publicly accessible, AWS, and a few other things. What are the top 50 API endpoints that are somehow related to it, right? Semantic search will always return results. Even if you search, if you have coffee, it will return that, right? But it will say the probability that that's what he's looking for is like 2%. Anyway, it found all the API endpoints. It found all the policies that somehow apply. I could have 100,000 policies, but it found policies that are important. It found patterns that matter, and it came up with those solutions. Like, hey, you can create a single instance, RDS instance, in this case using Crossplane. That's going to be simple. You can create database instance in GCP, which is bonkers. You can create a composite resource based on the composite resource. This would be the golden path, right? And so on and so forth. And you will see here that it says for this one, it uses organizational pattern, right? It found somewhere in those documents, somewhere in those company patterns that somebody said, hey guys, when this works for you, use this one. Don't use some random other stuff that we have available in our platform. So I'm going to say, of course, I'm going to use 3, right? And now it's going to go back. It's going to inspect the schema. Actually, it already did. It's going to come up with questions. It's going to, and by the way, AI is terribly bad at asking you questions. I don't know if you noticed that kind of, it assumes that you know what you're doing. So questions, there we go. What is the database name? And database name should be MyDB. And the namespace should be A-team. And those are, by the way, required questions. You want AWS correct? Yes, I don't need to answer that one. Region, you see here it says suggested US East 1, right? That's all coming from those company policies, right? Somewhere there was written that we use US East 1. I could still say I disagree, I know better, but by default that's fine. And instance size 5, I'm going to say, no, small, I'm cheap, I'm Scottish. There we go. Those were the required questions. Now we're going to go through a few other rounds of questions, like basic questions. Version 15 sounds good. Databases to create. No, let's go crazy. DB01 and DB02, right? And push credentials, absolutely not. And secret store name, it doesn't matter. And 5, pull credentials, absolutely no. And nobody cares. Root password key, this needs to be something secure. Secure. There we go. That one should work well. Should have written in Spanish, then nobody understands. More questions, those were the basic, advanced. I'm losing patience here. Yeah, skip. Skip, go. Go. By the way, this is a weekend project. This is not big. I'm just wanting to show you how you can actually create your own stuff relatively easily. Okay, create manifests. And now it will create manifests, right? I had a golden path, so it's going to be only one manifest. If I didn't have the golden path, already assembled composition, it would construct maybe 5, maybe 55 different resources. Anyway, it has all the instructions, it has all the logic, it has all the data, and it goes through a specific workflow to ensure that it always works. Show me the YAML. Yeah. There we go. That's the composition I was looking for. those two databases, USist1, etc., config map that will track what's changed, and so on and so forth. I can now say apply it, and I would leave happily ever after. How much time do I have? 10 minutes. I spoke faster. You know, when I prepare those talks, I prepare for the demo to fail, so I always have like 5 to 10 minutes to fix it. Now I'm confused, now I don't know what to tell you. I can open for questions. How about that? Ask me anything. Thank you. Upbound, crossplane, Paradox, DevOps Toolkit, I don't know, project. That's the one I showed you today. Anyway, questions, yes, please.
The MCP server, do you have it available in any of your repos publicly so I can see it?
That's this thing, right? I was careful. That's the one.
Do you have any difficulty converting to embedding some vector database? That's where I get stuck. I have the documentation fed as plugins and skills in Claude, but it's not the best. Like sometimes it ignores it.
So I don't, things like embeddings I don't do with Claude. So the way I designed this MCP, so MCP is just a protocol, just to be clear.
Yeah.
Realistically, what this is, what that is code plus the agent, right? And there are some things that are better done in code. There are some things that are better done with agents, right? Like creating embeddings, that's just calling, basically it's first figuring out what matters, because you don't want to put the document as embeddings. You find kind of things that matter, and probably the reference to the document if you need a full, right? And then you pass through one of the cheapest models you can imagine dedicated to embeddings that all cost close to nothing, and just convert the text you generated into numbers, and then you store it there. Now, the one thing that you need to take care is that how many dimensions are used to generate embeddings, and how many dimensions are used to convert your query to embeddings need to match. So you cannot switch from one to another.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So a lot of people are spending a lot of time building IDPs using Backstage or another type of portal.
Yes.
What advantage does this have over those approaches?
Great that you asked. So here's my theory. I might be completely wrong. We're all trying to predict the future. First assumption I'm making is that now, or not long from now, the only interface that your developers in your company will want to use is Cursor or Claude Code or whatever they chose. So my theory, and I might be completely wrong, that developers not long from now, you can tell, you know, I have this Backstage, and they say, I cannot care less. I don't care. I honestly don't care, right? I think that those interfaces as interfaces, not what they do, will be slowly dying, right? Now, another advantage is that you can use AI for two things. One is to help the end user do the right thing, right? So behind the scenes, I use crossplane composition, for example. I chose crossplane composition, right? But I, as a user, how do I know what I have in that cluster? There are literally 1,000 different resources. It figured it out for me, right? It figured out that it should be USist1, right? In this specific condition, right? There are a lot of things that AI can do. We just shouldn't exaggerate, right? I assume that that's, first of all, that's my interface for communication. I talk because I'm lonely, I talk with AI. AI does things for me, and what it does, you should be very careful what you let it do and what should be done by code. Like, for example, in my demo, I retrieved from the database top 50 resources that are probably related to what I do, and then I retrieved schema for each of those 50 resources and put them in a context. Now, could I instruct the agent to fetch 50 specific resources? Yes. Would they lose time and money for no good reason? 100%, right? So that was done by code because it's always the same, so on and so forth. So benefits really are in creative part of the process. In repeatable part of the process, please don't use AI. Continue using whatever scripts you're using. I don't know if that answered your question or no? Yeah, cool. Anybody else? This side, that side. Okay.
So have you considered different strategies because you're doing RAG
among other things.
And have you considered like creating some kind of standard like platform.md file that actually will tell your the model to something or some schema that tells the company practices for a specific project.
So I'll repeat just to see whether I understood. Kind of, did they create prompt or
Yeah, prompt.
Claude MD in a way or system prompt? No. I don't think it's a way to go, simply because it might sound very tempting at the beginning. I mean, I do use system prompts, just to be clear. But the thing is that if I would be putting everything that AI should know in a system prompt, I would reach 200K maximum or 1 million token maximum in no time, right? So you start Claude, and Claude says, for the first time, compacting. What are you compacting? Your system prompt, right? Because I'm already over the limit. So no, right? Because you need to think about, so let's say, in this simple demo, I have around 700 API endpoints in the simple cluster. In a real cluster, I would have more, and I would have many more clusters, right? Close to 1,000 resources, and full schemas for all of them, that's already over the limit. That alone. And now imagine me fetching information from Slack, from wiki pages, from Zoom's recordings, right? There's a lot of information. You don't want to do that, right? What you do want to have in a system prompt instructions how to do certain things. Like, for example, there is a system prompt that comes out of the box from MCP, but you can do kind of, hey, whenever somebody says that they want to create something, whatever that something is, call this tool. And this, in this case, is MCP. In some other case, it would be some CLI or whatever it is. So you want to put that important information, right? How to behave rather than all the information you should ever need. Does it answer to you? Anybody else? No, you're over there. No, I know you, somebody else. I'm kidding, okay, go ahead.
He said, so you're making a RAG, and you said, yeah, among other things.
Yes.
What are the other things?
Other things is that I have a bunch of tools in that MCP. Because it's agent instead inside of MCP, and agent is connected to its madness. Anyway, I have ways how to retrieve schema from code from agents, how to make sure that agents always run in a read-only mode, but code can write things into the cluster, connections to the database, how to do embeddings.
It's like a RAG with an orchestrator.
It's whatever I felt like that day when I was doing that stuff. It's my playground. There is a lot of random stuff. Don't use it seriously, please. Yes?
So where are you ingesting and finding all of the company recommended sources for the data to generate various sources?
So that's a tough part. Basically, what you need to do is connect your AI most likely. Because, I mean, you can do it manually. You look young. Maybe you do it before retirement, right? But in general, what you want is to point first AI to data sources. Like, hey, here are the wiki pages. And here is the very detailed instruction, what could be considered X. Like, if all those things, more or less, can be considered a company policy. Go through all the documents and find all the company policies, right? And then show it to me for confirmation, or just go straight into embeddings in a database, right? Go through Slack, do it periodically, right? In Kubernetes, for example, scan all API endpoints, and then whenever there is an event to change any of those API endpoints, update the database and so on and so forth, right? It depends on the data sources. Sometimes you will get away from simply connecting Cloud Code to Slack agent, for example, but you still need to work very hard on those instructions. If you just say, go to Slack and find information, it will be a nightmare, right? If you spend a day or two kind of experimenting with different instructions, then that's the most difficult part. Afterwards, putting it into the database embedding is easy.
Yeah, so this is basically requiring a very strong company documentation of how they want things done in their environment. It's kind of, you already need your processes already very well mapped out in order to kind of adjust.
Yes and no. So one of the advantages of AI is that it is really capable of going through crap that you have, right? Not you, hypothetical you. So you can really you can point it to Markdown, you can point it to Word documents. It works better with some things than other, but in general, if it's not working right, it could be that it's not good model to begin with, but more likely your instructions are not really detailed enough, right? And there is a fine art between detailed enough and detailed too much. Sometimes people go crazy and say kind of, oh, I spent 70 weeks writing a War and Peace type of document, kind of hits a whole literature, read it. Right? But your instructions, if they're good, it tends to find, because remember, the point with policies and capabilities and stuff like that very often is not to find like what code to execute or what script to run, or it's more like point to finding, oh, somebody said that we should only use US East 1 and US West 2, right? English is fine, because later on you will use it as English as well, right? You don't have to specify whenever there is a field in some YAML that says region. No. Just kind of whenever there is something related to regions, kind of like, kind of it works decently well.
So how are you gonna maintain like base quality for the system? Because if you need to tune, now you have system prompt, you have RAG, you have documents, and it did something wrong. If it was deterministic, you would have a bunch of test suites, and you ran all the test suites, you tuned it, and made sure that the new test case is, and you deploy it. But
so,
it's not deterministic. So
exactly. And it shouldn't be. That's previous point I'm trying to make. If you have a deterministic, repeatable stuff, don't use any type of intelligence, human or AI. Right? Just execute a script. Right? I don't need any form of intelligence. If you find me intelligent fish, it cannot do it either, right? Cannot just execute your scripts. Now, where AI shines is precisely when it's non-deterministic. That's when it shines, because, like, for example, writing code is not non-deterministic. Executing code is, sometimes, depending, right? But writing code is completely non-deterministic. Writing some manifest specification, YAML, Kubernetes, that's non-deterministic, right? The output might be, but the process is not. And whomever complains about, this is going to be very nasty, about, hey, AI is not deterministic. True, neither are you. Right? It helps me, rather, it has a very different role than scripts or pipelines and things like that. They're repeatable, deterministic. Whenever I apply this exact same file, the output is always the same. I don't need AI to execute applying that file. I'm what needed to create it in the first place, and that's by definition not deterministic. If it's deterministic, then just copy that file that you already have. You don't need to create a new one. Yes. I'm receiving this, and that's X, something I should be out. Thank you so much.